Hi, and welcome to another analysis by Antipolitica. Today is Wednesday, October 18, 2023. And in this episode, a couple of broad reflections on what we've been seeing in the Middle East and especially events of today. And as they say, sometimes in a week, decades of history happen. And it seems that we are living one of those weeks when history just accelerates. Today's wrap-up of Joe Biden's visit to the Middle East really hit us with this thought that we're witnessing the end of the American empire as we know it. The first hint of this came during that chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan with people falling off of American airplanes. That horrendous scene was kind of the first hint of what was to happen later on. We have also been very critical of the neocon policies in Washington and the whole story of Ukraine that we believe has really accelerated the decline of the American empire. And today's footage of Joe Biden's visit and him reading notes to say things that are kind of trivial, and his low energy, the fact that his visit to Amman, Jordan, and meeting with Arab leaders was canceled, which is unprecedented. We're not aware of any instance in which world leaders that are usually eager to meet American presidents would simply cancel the visit. So that was a big sign, but today really nailed it. And this kind of low energy ending of his visit, which didn't really make much sense to begin with. When a crisis like this happens, you usually send Secretary of State. There was no point in Joe Biden going to the Middle East as President of the United States. That was not a good idea to begin with. It turned out to be an even worse idea than it seemed. So today really feels like this is it. This visit has really shown that the emperor has no clothes, and that the American empire, as we know it, is pretty much done. As far as Israel, this horrendous story about the hospital in Gaza and the propaganda war as to who's really responsible, we don't know, and we don't think that it ultimately matters. What matters is that a very large chunk of the world believes it's an Israeli missile. And that tells us that this time around, Israel is losing propaganda war. And we still stand by what we said earlier in that other video on Israel's tough choices. And we believe that there is no military solution. The solution will have to be political and will be imposed probably on both Israel and the United States by the developments on the ground. And the more violence there is, the more pointless destruction of Gaza is, the worse it will turn out for the US and Israel. So we hope cooler heads will prevail, and Israel will step back from the brink, because the adventure of doing a large-scale intervention in Gaza, there's no telling how that could end. And given everything that we see, we don't really think that the cards are stacked favorably for Israel, should Israel decide to go that route. So we recommend watching that video that was put up on our channel 2 days ago. Today we want to talk about the United States and what this visit by Joe Biden to the Middle East revealed. And we believe that it basically revealed that the Arab world is done with the United States. It's no longer taking orders from the US. It's even willing to humiliate the US president by slamming the door in front of him and canceling a meeting. And even Gulf monarchies are kind of becoming difficult to control. These were historically client states, but it seems that they're, in a sense, so to speak, breaking free, and they're realizing that the West needs them more than they need the West, given the developments over the last 2 years, especially accelerated by the war in Ukraine. The world now has multiple centers of power. China's economy on a purchasing power parity basis is larger than that of the United States. Russia is in top 10. India is again another economic superpower in aggregate, and though it's still undeveloped and has lots of poverty, but with its population mass, its economy is huge. It's a big consumer of oil, and that's all that matters to Gulf monarchies. Moreover, they have financial resources, whereas the United States is running large budget deficits and printing money. And in addition to financial resources and tremendous wealth of Gulf state monarchies and Saudi Arabia, they also have the oil, and oil will continue to be important, and they'll continue to have customers for it, regardless of what the West chooses to do or not to do. So the world is multipolar. The actions of the Arab world are speaking loudly about that fact, and the United States and Israel as an ally, and Western Europe as an ally of the United States can choose to ignore that fact, but that will only be to their own detriment. And it's very, very dangerous to behave as if the world were still unipolar, if the world is in fact multipolar. And it will be really, really crucial for the political class in Washington to finally realize that and starts to behave accordingly, because this kind of behavior is only going to make things worse in the long run. So Hillary Clinton has recently and famously said that MAGA folks need deprogramming. We want to present an alternative view that basically argues that it's the unipolar imperial thinking and Washington establishment that need deprogramming. If you look at what the Washington elites, led by neocons, have been doing internally and externally over the last couple of years, we would argue that they just keep deepening the crisis and doing wrong things that dig us deeper and deeper into a hole. We spoke at length in 2 videos about on how many levels the action in Ukraine was reckless and wrong, and this continues. We see wrangling in Washington, and much of the resistance to the nomination of Jim Jordan seems to be Washington elites' desire to keep the status quo and keep spending extravagant amounts of money that we actually don't have. And the world is noticing. US bonds are becoming more and more difficult to sell. The dollar is still relatively strong, but that's just because there is no good alternative yet. But that alternative is being developed. So Washington on the internal front better get its act together soon and starts to control those deficits, because if they don't do that, things will not be pretty. If we look at external actions and this whole trip by Joe Biden, it basically tells us that the administration still thinks of the world as if it were still unipolar, and Arab countries are pretty loud and clear in explaining to the administration and Joe Biden that that's no longer the case. The US can no longer boss around unilaterally Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Jordan to take refugees, to do this, to do that. Arab countries are saying no loud and clear, and there is no way for the United States to force, for example, Egypt to take refugees from Gaza, or Saudi Arabia to leave BRICS. And enter conflict with Iran. It seems that these developments with around the Middle East and normalization between Iran and Saudi Arabia and other countries are irreversible. And despite what this administration would like to see happen, it's not going to happen. So things are becoming tougher and tougher politically, and it was almost sad to watch Joe Biden visit Middle East and have pretty much nothing to show for that visit. We also think that sending 2 carrier groups to Eastern Mediterranean is reckless and pointless. Like, what are they going to do? If there's a big regional war, it seems that Lebanon and Hezbollah is ready to fight Israel, and Israel will be seriously stretched if it tried to fight this war on 2 fronts. Moreover, as we spoke about earlier, military technology has changed, and Hezbollah is equipped with thousands of rockets and missiles, and it's not clear that Israel's defenses are ready for that kind of onslaught by missiles. So this could potentially be very ugly if the both sides don't step back from the brink. Now, this brings us to the 2 carriers. It seems that the multitude of rockets that was fired on Israel overwhelmed Israeli aerial defenses, and it's not really clear to us that those carrier groups would be able to defend themselves against similar onslaught of missiles, especially if it's directed from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Technologies change, and no military technology remains superior forever. So the last thing we would need in this situation would be for one of these carriers to be damaged or even sink to the bottom of the Mediterranean, because that would be instantaneous end of the American empire. And we'd see a rapid collapse of both military, political, and economic influence of the United States around the world. So it's reckless to send these ships over there without really a clear mission and the path to victory. So we don't know what the mission is, and how can we know the path to victory? But one worrying aspect of this situation is that those ships are vulnerable. What do we do if one, or God forbid, both of those ships get seriously damaged? What will that do to the position of the United States internationally? One worrying aspect of this is, as we mentioned earlier, is that if you look at the Russia-Ukraine war, there hasn't been much activity by Russia's Navy. Of course, their Navy is not as strong as the United States Navy, but it seems that in this new generation of warfare, ships are, especially large ships, are very vulnerable. Moreover, one of the developments in the war in Ukraine that's really worrying is that the United States seems to have supplied Ukraine with the longer range missiles that can hit Russia. So as Ukraine becomes increasingly desperate as its offensive stalls, and if Russia seems determined to go on a limited counteroffensive, we see some news of that possibly happening. What if Ukraine gets desperate and fires these missiles deep into Russia? And then one real risk is that Russia may, in response to that, supply some longer range and more capable missiles to Iran. Tit for tat. If the US and the West are going to give Ukraine missiles that can hit Russia, then Russia might give those missiles to Iran that can hit Eastern Mediterranean from Iran, and that really can paint a very worrying picture about what might happen in Eastern Mediterranean. So it seems that the administration is doing the opposite of that famous saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. They're just making really reckless moves without in reality carrying a big stick, and that's a very dangerous recipe. So it seems that the Washington establishment is doing kind of precisely the wrong thing with the big omnibus spending bills internally, and behaving on the international scene as if the world were still unipolar, when in reality it's multipolar, and the behavior of Gulf monarchies and Saudi Arabia in particular, and Egypt is a living proof that that's no longer the case, and that's clearly something to think about. So it seems that the United States in this over this entire decade of imperial decline has been doing precisely the wrong thing, and this is why we believe U.S. elites and establishment need deprogramming rather than the MAGA folks. In a new multipolar world, we believe that the U.S. has some distinct advantages that can be capitalized on to regenerate American power and regenerate interest around the world in cooperating with the United States and having good relations with the United States. We'll talk about these issues more in new episodes. But it seems that some of the distinct advantages of the United States are strong property rights and law and order, innovativeness and innovative spirit and entrepreneurial spirit of the American people. It's also a global currency and the strength of the US dollar. And if you think about all of these, with stifling regulation and emphasizing all kinds of policies that are an obstacle to formation of new enterprises and commercializing new ideas, we just keep getting into more and more energy regulation. The latest news from TechCrunch Plus, which is an interesting publication that talks about technological developments, says California passes law mandating venture capitalist firms to release investments diversity information. So we understand the need for social justice, but if you look at California and all kinds of nonsense that they have been imposing on businesses during the last decade or so, it's been just making more and more difficult to stay, and firms are finally leaving San Francisco and the Bay Area and the Silicon Valley. And now we are going further into this kind of imposition on small firms that are struggling for resources, trying to develop an innovative idea. And now we're going to impose these equity requirements and diversity requirements on firms that are, most of them fail anyway. Most startups fail anyway. So let's impose on venture capitalists some diversity requirements to make it even less likely that they will be successful. So innovativeness has traditionally been one of the strongest cards of the United States, and it seems that policymakers are doing their best to kill innovativeness and slow down innovation and the dynamism of the US economy. And that's precisely the wrong thing. Similarly, that extravagant spending is bound to hurt the US dollars, whereas the world needs a convenient currency for trading. And if anybody wants to establish their currency as a global trading currency, they need to run trade deficits for a while. Well, guess what? Neither China nor any of these new emerging countries are still willing to do that. So that's an opening. That's a chance for the U.S. dollar to serve as as a global trading currency for a while, for decades to come. But in order for that to happen, we need to put our house in order and not run these extravagant deficits that fire up inflation. Moreover, if you think about the reckless abuse of SWIFT and the banking system, exclusion of Russia in this pointless war in Ukraine, that has hurt the credibility of the United States and the West in managing global payment systems and having dollar be the reserve currency of the world. Because if you take away Russian assets, all these monarchies around the Gulf, all regimes around the world, what's the message that they get? Well, they think that, if they're going to ever have a disagreement with the United States, they run the risk of the United States confiscating their assets in Western banks. So what do? They look for other ways to store their wealth and buy gold and crypto and other currencies and make arrangements with other countries that are less likely to grab their resources. So on that front, we're kind of doing exactly the opposite of what we should be doing, and our establishment in Washington needs to be deprogrammed to start doing the right thing. And then finally, the rule of law and property rights. No other country, especially no other big country, comes close to the United States to this idea of property rights and being able to create something and own it. If you're an inventor in China or Russia or anywhere else, you can do your thing, you can start your business, you can innovate, come up with something really interesting and valuable, but then you always run the risk of the party-dominated state and individuals associated with it grabbing your innovation and taking it away from you. No country, and including the United States, has ever been perfect and had perfect enforcement of property rights. But the US traditionally had an edge in that respect. So we believe that this idea of a strong legal system and a strong property rights regime is something that has been a major factor in making the United States as innovative as it has been historically. But we see again establishment trying hard to dismantle the rule of law and property rights. And we also hear lots of noises about socialism and other things that are fashionable on the woke left and left in general. And we'll talk about that in another video. But one distinct advantage of the United States on which this country should build and go back to definitely is this idea of free markets, entrepreneurial capitalism, property rights, and so forth, because the United States has been a uniquely fertile ground for new businesses and new ideas to be developed. If we can get back to that, that should secure superpower status to the United States for decades and centuries to come. And this kind of adventurism and based on printed money and having bases around the world is really a dead end. And we saw that on full display today with Qatar, basically, even though they have US base, they have shown that they don't necessarily have to follow US orders. And the whole foreign policy approach, we believe, should be reconsidered. And we need a new kind of maybe MAGA style, multipolar world approach to foreign policy making in the United States. Without that, risks are huge, and we sketched out some scary scenarios minutes ago, but that's something to think about. And it's dangerous for the emperor to find out that they don't have any clothes on, and it's good to be alert and act on time rather than react to situations that the rest of the world imposes on you after you've behaved recklessly for a long time. So with that, we'll develop these ideas in the future, obviously. We'll see you soon. Thank you.